Hello, everyone. We're now live for today's Q&A on how Canva uses Snowflake as a CDP for audience segmentation. I'm Katie. I'm your host for the day. You can also call me MC Flamingo, which is our mascot here at Census. And today, our guest of honor is Matt Castino, who leads data and analytics for the growth and lifecycle marketing team at Canva. We're also joined by three modern data stack experts: Sean Lynch, co-founder at Census; Patrick Crosby, Technology Alliances at Snowflake; and Kelly Colapfel, leading partner sales engineering at Fivetran. So we're going to do official intros soon, but in the meantime, we have a poll. So what's your biggest marketing data challenge today? And Matt, I'd like to ask you, which one would you choose for Canva and why?
Sorry. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. So I guess from our perspective, our biggest challenge at the moment is moving away from attribution style models for measuring the return that we get on our ad spend and trying to look more from an incremental perspective. So looking at the value and the revenue that our ad spend generates over and above what we would get anyway if we didn't show advertising. And then that better helps us to allocate our marketing budget to various channels and various countries and identify opportunities that way. So that's probably the biggest change or growth space and challenges that's going on in marketing analytics at Canva right now. So it's a pretty exciting time to be here.
Thanks for sharing that, Matt. We have 35 votes in, so don't forget to submit your vote. And Patrick, I'd like to ask you, from what you've heard from customer conversations or implementation at Snowflake, what do you predict will be the most popular answer?
Yeah, definitely attribution. Just the complexities of attribution, how to account for it, doing like multi-touch attribution. And then as things like cookies degrade, increased regulation, it's just much harder to really track how campaigns are running across all the different touch points. So yeah, of these, it's definitely attribution.
Gotcha. And how about you, Kelly, from your experience at Fivetran?
Yeah, I'm going to vote for attribution as well. I'm going to actually go back. I was in a consulting role for 6 years before Fivetran, and remember a client asking me, bringing us in and saying, "Hey, Kelly, I need you to help us spend more money." And it was a significant 8-figure amount. And the problem statement was that they could not identify, they had all this extra money, but they couldn't identify between paid ads, paid social, other channels that were they knew where they were driving business, but data was siloed. They didn't have great quality, and they could not figure out the answer to really pinpoint how they wanted to spend that budget. So I'm going to go attribution as well. It'll be interesting to see what happens on the poll.
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually the one that's currently winning. Sean, is that your vote as well?
I mean, attribution is definitely at the top of the list. So +1. I will give a little bit of a shout out to identity resolution and just sort of having the clean data inputs as well. We spend a lot of time with our customers talking about data modeling and how to solve that problem, but that's all in service of attribution at the end of the day.
Makes sense. And it seems that marketing attribution is the biggest marketing data challenge with 33% of the votes. Number 2 is marketing analytics. And then number 3 is activating data in MarTech tools. Very cool. So we'll share some recommendations in our roundtable Q&A in the second half of the session, but just some housekeeping reminders for now. If you have questions at any time throughout the session, submit them to the questions box, and you can actually upvote the questions you want to see answered. So submit a question and upvote other questions that you think are good. We'll have some dedicated roundtable Q&A time at the end where we'll be answering questions from the questions tab. And everyone will receive the recording in their email afterwards. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Sean to kick us off. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Before we jump into the details here, I want to do just a little bit deeper introductions to everyone that we have on the panel today. We've got some wonderful people from a number of different companies to explore this story. So quickly, I'm Sean. I'm one of the co-founders here at Census, and I lead the product team. I get the joy of working very closely with our customers like Matt on a pretty regular basis, as well as our partners like Kelly and Patrick. So excited to be surrounded by friends talking about some of these things here today. Matt, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself next.
Hi everyone, my name's Matt. I'm from Canva. So for those of you that may not be familiar with what Canva does, we are an online or cloud-based graphic design tool. Originally, we were a consumer-based product where we helped people design presentations and business cards and social media posts and things like that. But now we're also moving into the area of providing work suite tools for medium to large businesses as well, such as docs and whiteboards and collaboration tools, people who want to use Canva for work, which is really exciting. I work as the Lifecycle Data Lead, so we'll get more into it soon, but basically I am the data lead that supports our lifecycle marketing efforts here at Canva, and yeah, really excited to talk more about what we do and how we use Census and Fivetran and Snowflake.
Kelly, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Hey, folks, Kelly Coleffel with Fivetran. I look after global partner sales engineering. So we're working with tech partners like our great partners here today, but also consulting services partners too. So GSIs and SIs. If you're not as familiar with Fivetran, we are the automated data platform. If you're going down a modern data stack path and using great solutions like Snowflake, dbt Labs, and Census. So if you need that automated data movement fully managed, that's when you call Fivetran.
Awesome. Go ahead, Patrick.
And I am Patrick Crosby. I am on the Tech Alliances team at Snowflake. So I get the opportunity to work with our amazing ecosystem of technical partners like Fivetran and Census, ultimately to bring value for great clients like Canva. I have a ton of experience in the broader MarTech and AdTech space and am focused specifically on those partners here at Snowflake. If you're not familiar, Snowflake is the data cloud. So we're ultimately helping our clients mobilize their data across a global network and ultimately helping partners like Fivetran and Census drive really incredible value for mutual clients.
Awesome. All right. And another plug again. Thanks everyone for joining. Really great to have you all here. I'm very excited to jump into this conversation. So in terms of agenda today, what we're going to cover is a really high-level overview of this kind of emerging pattern that we're seeing on top of the modern data stack that we refer to as the Composable CDP. So I'll give you a little bit of introduction to Census, the Composable CDP concept, what that means, and the goal here is to really spend most of our time with our guest of honor, Matt here from Canva, talking about how he and his team take this pattern or take these efforts and sort of grow on that and the impact that that's had at Canva. And then at the end, we will open this up to a bit of a roundtable with the full audience. So we'll be talking a little bit about the success that Canva has had, but also what we're seeing at Fivetran and Snowflake and Census as well. So please, as Katie mentioned, jump into the questions tab. Get your questions in there, upvote the ones that are there so that we can dive into some of those details as we go along. So first, let me just quickly introduce Census, because I think we're probably the least named logo in terms of the list of the four that we've got here today. So Census really quickly is a data activation platform. And there are certainly, there's a long storied history of integration products and that sort of thing out there in the world. Our unique approach, and when we got started, was we built directly on top of a data warehouse like Snowflake. So rather than plugging into apps or that sort of thing, our whole goal was to take the great work, all of the sort of transformation cleaning, all of that source of truth that's being built in the data warehouse and expand that out to the rest of the ecosystem. We started in about 2018, really focused on PLG and companies like Canva, and since then grown to expand to hundreds of customers across retail and e-commerce, consumer apps and B2B apps, media and entertainment, etc. So when we started Census, really our goal was to take all of the great first-party data, all of that data that you know kind of specifically about your customers, that you're either collecting directly from their interactions with your product or pulling in with a product like Fivetran into your Snowflake database, data warehouse, and take advantage of that source of truth that you're building to make it easy to get to these destination tools. What we saw at the time, and it's certainly improved since then, is that data and marketing teams were in this bifurcated world where all of that great data was getting cleaned up, activated, built inside the data stack, but not necessarily where it needed to be. And so what typically happened at that point is that you would have this kind of request export process where you're saying, hey, I need this data set, it needs to power this campaign, I needed it yesterday, I need to upload it to Facebook. That goes into some queue, it's always P0, and a lot of the times, once it gets done, it's too late. And that's not, anybody's fault, it's just a process that's not necessarily streamlined. And so our whole goal at Census is to make this as simple as possible, take advantage of all the great work that the data team is already doing on the left side and make it dead simple to drop into these destinations, enable those marketing teams. This is not a new problem. The approach of building this on top of a warehouse is new, but this problem of first-party data needing to get into destination tools has existed for a long time. And so historically, this has been the world of the CDP, or a customer data platform. This is a term that's been around for maybe 10, 15 longer years now. And there's a number of products in this space, especially if we've got folks from marketing backgrounds here in the audience today. This product, this category, does a ton of different things. One component is on the left, the collection for various different apps or events or marketing. The middle is sort of the transformation, unifying, and then the right side is activating and pushing that data out. And a lot of these terms sound familiar for the data side of the audience, right? There's a lot here that we're also doing on the data side of the world. And that duplication represents a problem. So we have sort of the CDP that is really built purpose for marketing. It's very good at what it does in terms of that kind of marketing flow, pulling event data, doing that unification, pushing it off to the destinations, activating it. But it's duplicated. It's a completely separate silo from what's already happening in Snowflake. It's really the change that we've seen over the last couple of years is the gravity around the data warehouse, around that data cloud, sort of pulling everything into one spot. It starts to be hard to justify having a completely separate silo, very sort of specific for the marketing purpose. And so what we've seen customers start to build, put together, is what we call the Composable CDP. And the idea here is we have those three columns again coming out that we saw in sort of the CDP typical architecture diagram, except we have more traditional data, modern data stack products here in the individual columns, right? So we've got Fivetran, DBT for transformation, Census. Our whole goal is really on the activation side, and we're all sitting on top of Snowflake. This stack has already existed for other purposes, but what we're seeing is that some of the greatest wins right now in terms of data and sort of the data problems that a business faces today is actually on the marketing side. As we talked right at the beginning of the call, the big problem there is around attribution. How do I solve attribution for my company? And the inputs into that are not necessarily something that's available out of the box. The benefits of the Composable CDP approach are that you first get back to that single source of truth, right? You get back to one place. If you're talking about metrics, if you're talking about attribution, you're not trying to solve the problem of why don't these numbers line up with your numbers. You have one set of data that you're working on top of it. But on top of that, you have a ton of flexibility and control over how you are working with your data. So you can transform it, you can approach the attribution problem or the identity resolution problem in the way that is appropriate for your business, that pulls in all of the inputs into that, not necessarily just the ones that the CDP product off the shelf is going to support. You also have better governance and security, so you're not creating a duplicate of that data, especially particularly sensitive customer data. So that means that all of your investment in terms of governance, observability, who has access to what, controls, and that sort of thing on top of your data warehouse, on top of your data cloud, benefit everything that the marketing team is doing, as opposed to trying to worry about this duplicate problem. And then finally, you're future-proofing your stack. So if you want to start getting into, say, machine learning or some very advanced data science techniques, you're not beholden to a pattern that's sort of a black box to you, that's given to you by a product. You can assemble the best of breed products to solve the data problems that are appropriate for your business, that are top of mind for your business. So if you don't like the direction that a CDP is going in terms of other connectors, you can bring in your own data sources or own data destinations. You can combine various different techniques to do that transformation. You have the ability to run full SQL and now Snowflake, some other programming language. So you have a lot of control to actually solve these problems that you don't necessarily have. This is really the benefit that we've seen companies take advantage of from a variety of different angles. And so I'm really excited to have Matt here today, because we've seen Canva go through this progression. We've seen Matt deal with a lot of these conversations over the past couple of months of years of working together. So maybe Matt, to start, do you want to give us sort of an overview of your role day to day at Canva and what that looks like in terms of responsibilities and the projects that you're working on?
Sure. So as Lifecycle Data Lead here at Canva, I work closely with our CRM and Lifecycle team within growth marketing. So the Lifecycle team design push notification, email, and in-product message campaigns to drive engagement, push users into revenue funnels, drive collaboration through Teams and other collaboration tools, and facilitate uptake of new products and features. So that's kind of what Lifecycle is at Canva. So we help the Lifecycle team do things like measure the effectiveness of their marketing campaigns that they run through Braze, to analyze the contribution of the program to Canva's foundational goals, to improve their targeting, to make sure that the right message is being delivered to the right user at the right time, and to refine their messaging strategy through research and experimentation. And finally, we do a little bit of supporting the development of automated messaging tooling so that we can scale our program and create efficiencies through that way. So yeah, that's it.
That's it. That's a lot. So how do you collaborate with the marketing teams? Like, what does that trade-off or handoff process look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. So potentially stepping back and talking a little bit about Canva's org structure and how we do things here might help answer that question. So Canva's org structure is designed to create these small multidisciplinary teams. So you'll have a small team that might have an engineer, a front-end, back-end engineer, a data analyst, someone from product or design. So you have these multidisciplinary teams with different specialties and different approaches and different skills, all working together to solve key business problems or to help Canva towards where it's trying to head. So as a result, most of the data analysts here at Canva are embedded into particular teams, as opposed to having sort of like a centralized data function that sort of takes requests from all over the business. And the reason that we do it that way is it allows everyone to become subject matter experts in a particular field. So the data team that I lead works really closely with lifecycle marketers to understand their roadmap and their goals, which really helps us to provide that really nuanced level of tactical and strategic advice. So we help them to prioritize their campaigns or their efforts based on their goals and their roadmaps, what's worked previously in the past, to refine their targeting, to make sure that each individual campaign that we're running forms part of a coherent orchestrated strategy across the whole program, and to make sure that we're aligning what we're doing with the company goals more broadly. So that's kind of how we work. We have like a tactical BAU component of the role where we're supporting individual campaigns, but we're also helping them refine the strategy, working with them to provide tactical and strategic advice. So we're sort of involved at all levels of decision making within that particular team. So that's kind of how we work here.
Got it. I know that the sort of centralized versus distributed isn't always a hot topic when I'm talking with data teams. Just out of curiosity, can you tell me a little bit more about, like, when you say it's a small team, how small is that, and do you work together with other data analysts?
Yeah, it's a good question, and again, the structure is a little bit complicated in terms of, I sit as part of a broader marketing data team. So and Lifecycle is often sort of one arm or one way that we're trying to move a particular metric. So let's say we're trying to drive Teams growth, or we're trying to drive subscriptions. Then we'll have performance marketing campaigns. We'll have lifecycle campaigns. We'll have in-product efforts. And so as a result, I'm working closely with Lifecycle to help them advance, their particular contribution to that goal. But we're also talking to each other to work out how we can create unified strategies, create efficiencies, work on things in a collaborative way. So in terms of the size of the team, there's 3 data analysts, about 10 or 11 marketers, and then a couple of back-end engineers as well. And the size of the team, that sounds like a large team, but it kind of depends on where you are in the business, I guess, the size of that team, and the ratio of marketers or people in product or in marketing might be different to the number of analysts. Just kind of depends. So we're flexible in that way in terms of our team size and our structure, but ultimately what we have is people from different specialties all specializing in a particular area and becoming experts in it. So that's pretty much how it works.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's it's always a fascinating topic of conversations when we're talking with teams. Similar one, I would love to hear a little bit more about the data stack at Canva, the tools that you selected, what challenges were you really aiming to solve when you set that up? And I think I've got a little diagram for you here.
Yeah, so I can sort of talk broadly about what goals, or what the goals were of building the data stack, and then I can talk a little bit about how we use individual tools in this diagram to sort of get us there. But one of the primary goals was to have all our data in the one place, right? So that's what Snowflake is for us. It's a place that receives data from all over the business and from outside the business. So we're collecting event data through our internally developed product analytics platform, which allows us to generate insights about how users are interacting with the product, or users and non-users are interacting with the product. Then we use Fivetran to get data from third parties, so our advertising platforms, our CRM tools. We import data from third parties, from CSVs, from Google Sheets, all sorts of places, and we put it all into Snowflake. And so the goal is to really create an architecture that allowed us to have one source of truth and integrate our data from multiple different sources into one place so that we can really activate all of our data, integrate it, and then unlock it in lots of different ways. So that's kind of one of the high level goals. The second goal was to find a set of tools that really reduced the barrier to entry for creating data pipelines and for moving data around. So traditionally, to create data pipelines, to move data around, to activate your data, often you needed a lot of support from data engineers and warehouse engineers to create these pipelines and make it possible to move data around. But with tools like Fivetran and dbt, essentially what we can do is a data analyst with an understanding of SQL and a tiny bit of Python can ingest data from a third party, bring it into the warehouse, transform it, aggregate it, integrate it with data from other sources, push it out to our BI tools. We can then use Census to push it out to our go-to-market tools, and we can do this all ourselves. And we not so the goal was to really create that flexibility and reduce that turnaround time for time to insights, in terms of we can collect data, do all the transformations, push it out really quickly ourselves, and we do this every day. So that was the second high level goal of, you know, when the company designed this tech stack. It also creates a lot of flexibility in terms of a lot of these tools are open source, and they allowed us to build our own internal architecture on top of them so that we can have a great deal of flexibility in how we do things. And that means that, you know, we're not locked into the particular limitations of an individual tool like a CDP, for example. Super flexible, super quick. Yeah, that gives you a high level understanding of why we picked these different things. Did you want me to talk about individual tools? So I can talk a little bit about, so in terms of where our data is coming from, we're getting data from backend services, we're getting data from third parties through Fivetran, we're getting data from product analytics platform, and it's all into Snowflake. Everything's coming into Snowflake. dbt is what allows us to democratize those data pipeline building. So really don't need that much specific skills to you know, do things like build data pipelines. You can build macros and functions on top of our data, so you have this reusable, scalable code that we can use across all our data pipelines instead of, you know, writing individual DDLs and stuff to do every single time. So dbt allows us to automate a lot of that process. And Census is what we use to take all our data from our machine learning models, our data sets, and our integrations, aggregation, all that stuff, and push it out to all our marketing tools. So yeah, that's a kind of a high level understanding or explanation of what our data stack is, and we love it, basically, is a short answer.
Before we go on, do you want to just briefly maybe mention the, I guess, what would fall under the business actions category for you, the tools that you're actually using on the marketed side?
Yeah, sure. So Braze is our CRM platform. So we use Braze to send our emails, our push notifications, our in-product dialogues. So we're sending things like audiences, user attributes, the outputs of machine learning models from our warehouse, and we're sending that via Census into Braze. And that allows us to create really bespoke and targeted messaging. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about specific use cases in a second, but that's what we do with Braze. And then in terms of, we can talk about it now. So for use case number one.
Might as well just hop to that.
So we use Census to populate values in Braze to customize our messaging. So that's one of the things that we do. So for example, we might send an email out that says, congrats on creating your 10th design. Or you've been using Canva for 3 months in a row. How about you go for 4? So again, really trying to unlock all of the data inside our warehouse and then use that to create this personalized messaging experience for our users. It also, the fact that Census is sitting on top of our data warehouse means that we can also leverage our machine learning outputs, such as we have a model that's called a user's propensity to start a trial. So that generates a value that indicates how likely a user is to start a subscription at Canva. And we identify users that are kind of in this niche range of propensity to trial. So we kind of ignore the people that we know that the model suggests aren't really interested in trialing. We ignore the users that are so likely to start a trial that we just kind of want to leave them alone and just let them find it on their own. But identify that subset of users that are primed for a little bit of a push or a nudge or need a little bit of help finding that or understanding the benefits of it. And then we can send those users additional nurturing and upsell campaigns. And we can target that messaging across their preferred channel, across multiple channels if we need to. And we can then personalize the content of that message as well, based on what we think they might want to use Canva Pro for specifically. So that's probably in terms of what I'm involved in, that's probably the primary use case that I have for Census. is I'm involved heavily in orchestrating this data pipeline from our warehouse into Braze. We also use Census for sending data to our ad platforms, such as Facebook and Google Ads. So we essentially use our warehouse to identify these high quality users. So it might be users that have been on Pro for a long time, or users who are regular active users on Canva, so daily or weekly or monthly repeated power users, I guess. Identify who those users are, and then help our ad platforms target how they're, or help our ad platforms optimize how they're targeting users or how they're displaying our campaigns to optimize getting users that are the highest quality for us. So that's another thing that we use Census for, and yeah, it just makes the process super easy.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of interested in digging into that a little bit. What are the advantages of this approach that you found relative to, I don't know, maybe other things that Canva was doing historically?
Yeah, sure. So before we had Census, we used to rely on event data going into Braze to generate. We used to send all our event data to Braze, not all of it, it's too much of it. A lot of our event data to Braze, and use that to target messaging. So we would send users who start an event when a user started a trial, or an event when a user signed up, and then we'd use that to target or to automate the delivery of onboarding campaigns. Or, but the problem with relying solely on event data for segmentation and those sorts of things is that one, Braze has this volume-based pricing model in terms of for every unit of data that you send, you pay. So we often don't need to know every single time a user does a particular action. We may just want to aggregate that data and then choose the frequency with which we send that to Braze. So Census allows us to do that and to generate huge cost savings that way for Braze in terms of their volume-based pricing model. Event data is also, I mean, it's useful, but you want to be able to generate insights and integrate event data with other data sources to provide, you know, more contextualized information around the user rather than just a raw event data. So having our warehouse do all that computation and integration and then sending that to Braze via Census allows us to integrate our data rather than just relying on raw event data going in. So yeah, the two, in terms of Braze, they're the two main advantages, I guess.
Got it. Okay. All right. That makes sense to me. And I think a very related conversation here is sort of how do you measure ROI, or thinking about the impacts of adopting a market stack like that, like this. I know that I've heard that from a number of the customers that we work with. Can you maybe talk about, I guess, key outcomes or specific things that you were looking for when you were moving to a stack like this?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the two ones that are top of mind would be that firstly, there's faster turnaround times. So when you're not reliant on data engineers and that bottleneck of trying to get data engineers and warehouse engineers to build pipelines for you, and you can just sort of do it yourself using easy to use, repeatable processes, and then make that available to DAs across our whole org. I think we have 150 DAs now. And that's really, really quick turnaround in terms of data coming in, being pushed out to have impact really, really, really quickly. And so I guess how we measure it firstly is fast turnaround time, not having to wait to activate a lot of these insights, a lot of the data that we're generating. A new feature that we've sort of utilized more and more that Census has rolled out is previously, if we wanted to create a new audience or some data that we wanted to send to Braze, we would have to build a model inside our data warehouse and then push that into Census. And that became a little bit problematic in terms of, at the moment, we have somewhere between a weekly and bi-weekly deployment cycle. So if you want to create a new audience and push that to Braze, it might take 5 minutes of work, but not be able to get deployed into production until next week. And that really slows things down. So one of the efficiencies that we've created is just by hooking our warehouse directly up to Census. Census allows you to write queries on top of your warehouse to create audiences and segments without that deployment cycle, and then push that into Braze straight away. So really fast turnaround time, which has been really great. I guess another thing is that Census has recently released a new product which provides a point and click interface over the top of your data warehouse. So we can now we're working on allowing our marketers to go in and create these audiences from our warehouse models themselves using point and click. And then they can do a lot of the stuff that they need to support their campaigns without us now. So our job becomes more around establishing and maintaining that data model that sits underneath that interface. And then they can do a lot of that stuff themselves. And that will, eliminating another stage of the process, will also create a lot of efficiency. So we're really excited to utilize that more and more. So turnaround time is a huge thing for us. It's a fast-moving company. It's a fast-moving industry. We want to be able to generate insights and activate our data as quickly as possible. And this tech stack including Census, really helps us to do that.
Perfect.
Yeah, and the other thing, I guess, is, as I said before, touched on before, was, we don't need that many engineers to make our warehouse run smoothly. So we have 100 to 150 data analysts and less than 10 warehouse engineers. So, it just means that they help us keep the tooling running, and then we can take it from there. So I guess that's another thing that, really works for us as well.
That makes a ton of sense, and I'm glad to hear that that we're able to help get a little bit more out, or enable some of the folks on the marketing side to take some of the work off your plate, Matt. I guess my last question here is for all of the aspiring Matts in the audience, the folks that are pre-adoption of the techniques and stack that you described here. Last thoughts or advice on how they can make the switch to something like this?
I guess in terms of advice, I would say really try and prioritize not replicating your data across multiple systems. Having it all in one place, having it all talk to each other in a way that you can integrate, focus on that. That unlocks a lot of possibilities for us. So, and I think that the other thing is really trying to understand the use cases for what you want to use that data for, because I find that you can have the best tech stack in the world, you can write beautiful code, ChatGPT writes excellent code, right? So no matter how much, no matter what the quality of your tooling is, no matter how good a code you can write, if you don't understand what you need your data for, and what's top of mind for your stakeholders, what's your company's North Star, what problems are you trying to solve, then you're not going to go very far. And that's the thing that we focus on the most here, is really trying to understand what we're trying to accomplish, where we're trying to go, and then build tooling and solutions to optimize for that, rather than just bringing in the best tools and then hoping that just solves all our problems, because it won't.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great, Matt. Thank you so much for walking us through that. I know I get to hang out with you and see it on a regular basis, but even I learned things today. So this is useful for at least me. But we've been queuing up a bunch of questions, both about sort of composable CDP, some of the products and techniques here. So I think I'm going to switch over to the roundtable and invite Kelly and Patrick to join us for the rest of the conversation where we get into some of the questions. So let me take a quick look. I'm going to sort by upvotes here. There's definitely some good ones. I'm glad that folks are asking this. Maybe we'll start with Nikhil. So Nikhil asks, wondering if there's any perspective on how we resolve identity resolution challenges with a composable CDP. For example, how matured are Snowflake's native apps for identity resolution? Given the Snowflake part of that question, Patrick, do you want to maybe start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. I think identity resolution is something that comes up frequently, particularly when you're starting to think about a composable approach to a customer data pipeline. And so I think first it's important to think about the different types of identity resolution that many of the brands are driving. And so at the core, there's deterministic. So really just sort of mapping interactions of your known customers across the different touch points. So you see someone on web and you want to be able to connect that to a mobile interaction. Those types of mappings are at its core joins and merges of data that in a composable approach can often be done as that data is coming in, either through Fivetran or DBT. And so that can really drive that first layer of identity resolution. What we also see, though, is many organizations want to expand upon that and actually resolve identities even outside of the knowledge that they have within their assets. So how can I understand identity at a human level, even beyond me seeing that device ID or that person on one of my sites or in my store? And that's where you start to get into some of the third-party identity spines. And so Snowflake does support native integrations into those, so you can pull that in as well. And that's an ecosystem of data that's continuing to grow as both third parties want to bring that in. And then we're also seeing organizations doing direct identity matches, so essentially clean room type identity sharing, where they're saying, Canva, I want to work directly with, say, Walmart as a random example to sort of connect identity and understand if we can expand. So there are a lot of different approaches. And I think to a lot of the points that we're raising here, by centralizing your understanding of your users and having that all in one place, it's much easier to both do the deterministic mapping, because you've got that all within one location in your Snowflake data cloud. And then you also have the ability to map that to other assets outside in the open web.
Great. Okay. Very, very interesting. Actually, Matt, I'm curious if you have anything to share on how you approach identity resolution at Canva, just from the practitioner's perspective here.
It's very, we're fortunate in that most of the visits to our site are logged in users. So that helps a lot. But there's certainly, the answer is no. I don't really have a huge amount.
Fair enough. I'm putting you on the spot here.
There's probably people at Canva that have a great perspective on that, but I'm not one of them.
Yeah, I will say that we tend to see the most challenges with this in like media industries, in industries where there's a lot more anonymous behavior that you then have to map into some of that known behavior. If you're lucky enough to be in a space where everyone is visiting and sort of logged in and known to you, that makes these a lot easier. But for a lot of industries, it is a very complex challenge.
Perfect. Okay. Let's move on to the next one here. Kelly, I think this might be an interesting one for you. How do you control accuracy and correctness when integrating to existing models? For example, the data vault model. When you allow data analysts to build pipelines in the data warehouse, I'm curious, from Fivetran's perspective, I know that data quality matters a lot. What do you see from your side?
Yeah, no, it's a great one, and I think that's right at the top of the list. If data quality is off right on that ingest, then the rest of the the rest of the outcomes are no good. So one of the things that Fivetran is really passionate about is ensuring that we give a really nice, normalized, and let me use a better word than that. I'm going to say a understandable data set, but it's clean and error free. And we're gonna make sure that that is done 100% of the time. So Fivetran is going to deliver that to Snowflake. From there, I've got a really nice organized data set. I've got my schemas, I've got my tables, got my columns. I can pick that up with, maybe it's a DBT model. We've got close to 90 packages with DBT now that you can take out of the box as a fast start on everything from marketing analytics to campaign attribution, and then really take it that last mile from there. So to me, it starts with ensuring that source to target Snowflake is really a one-to-one match, and it's in an understandable fashion, it's in an easy to access fashion, and it's done very, very timely.
Great. And Patrick, from the Snowflake perspective, what are you seeing in terms of data quality and testing? I think that relates to this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, I think when you think about data quality, the idea of having a single source of truth is really critical. One of the issues is, as you create data silos across even third-party vendors that you're working with, the different internal systems that you have, just being able to bring that together in one place, you're gonna get issues with that quality just by the nature of that activity. So that's one. The other is that because you're centralizing that, it is much easier for you to have one team or one partner to really focus on the quality aspects. So doing analysis like, is this fraudulent or redundant data, can all be done in one place, or being able to map across users. So again, getting back to that single source of truth, which Matt talked a ton about as a key initiative for Canva, can really help with the data quality aspect of it.
Great. Okay. Matt, I think this next one is very clearly for you. From Canvas's perspective, what's the #1 limitation for such a composable CDP setup?
The #1 limitation. It's a good question. #1 limitation. I guess that potentially one of the challenges with setting up this kind of composable system is that there's so many products on the market, and there's so many options for what you can choose for each stage of this funnel, right? And there's lots of different tools out there, and it requires you to sort of really become experts in those individual tools. So potentially, if you just want to get something going quickly, maybe something that's got more of a plug and play flavor to it may have some advantages there, but then you're going to be limited later downstream in terms of scale and flexibility. So is that a good answer?
I think that is. I mean, it's part of the reason that we have these great companies on the call today. I mean, there are a lot of people vying for your stack. And we found that the one that you've deployed at Canvas certainly seems to produce the most reliable results. So I think the next one is actually also for you here, as the Braze expert amongst the four of us, I think. How fast does data make it into your marketing tools like Braze? Are there cases where the composable CDP adds time to getting that action? The example that Ben gives here is cart abandonment in sort of an e-commerce case.
Yeah, good question. So we use a combination of both fast and batch data to do lots of the different things that we do inside Braze. So we are sending event data straight from our product analytics platform into Braze, and that's really important for generating messages that really need to be delivered in a timely fashion. So for example, we don't have too much of a cart abandonment thing in Canva because we're not e-commerce in that way. But an example that we have might be that we want to send a sign up, an onboarding email to our customers when they sign up. So we send an event for user created. When a user gets created into, it triggers an event, and then we push that into Braze, and then that triggers an onboarding email, which we can send, 5, 10, 15 minutes after they sign up. Or we might want to deliver an in-product dialogue after a user publishes to promote them to sign up to a trial because they've just gotten value from the product, like right then and there. They've designed something, they've pushed it out, they've got a finished product, they've gotten value from Canva. And now we want to sort of say, while they're in that state of mind and right after they achieve that success, let's try and prompt them to start a trial. And we want to be able to deliver that message instantaneously. So a user publishes a design, dialog box straight away. So we have that fast moving data for those particular use cases. But not everything needs to be quite that fast moving, right? So Census allows, so for the stuff that we send through Census, I guess, most of it's sent on a day, it's sent on daily batch as our warehouse refreshes once a day. And then that's the typical cadence that we have for our batch data or for our slower moving data. But Census allows you to control that frequency, and it's kind of up to you how frequently you want to send that data. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And to be honest, this is one of the kind of misconceptions that we see with a lot of our companies. When they think of a warehouse, they sort of think of the nightly job. And Patrick, I'm wondering if you maybe wanted to talk a little bit about how Snowflake thinks about data frequency, data speed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a common sort of misconception. I think partly if you think of there are definitely CDP approaches where they focus on everything should be real time. The reality of it is, as Matt described, it's not needed for a lot of use cases. There are some, so cart abandonment is a good one. I've helped brands actually run campaigns that are essentially takeover campaigns. You arrive at a store and you get an offer from a competitive store. So those types of things are very specific and do need to be timely. So one, it's understanding what are actual real-time use cases that you need to do and what can be done in either micro batch or batch. And then to your point, Sean, you're correct, right? Like running on a data cloud like Snowflake, you are able to actually drive those real-time use cases. So it is not nightly jobs. There's the ability to do batch jobs, of course, micro batching and real-time use cases. And with the partners that we work with, similarly, they are driving real-time use cases. So we're able to give a seamless experience that is actually targeted. And so it's the most efficient use of your organization's resources so that you are driving those real-time experiences for the cases that matter. And then you're doing micro batch or batch, typically almost never daily. Like that is not the frequency that's being driven, but even doing like hourly loads for things that don't need to be as fast. So it is there, it's available, and it's something we actually focus on both on the native capabilities within Snowflake, as well as how we partner with all of the organizations that are in our tech alliances group.
Patrick, it goes back to something Matt was talking about, which is that flexibility and the variation in workloads that Snowflake gives you. If we're delivering data into Snowflake, that may vary, as you said, by use case. It can also vary down to the data source type in terms of the latency you need. And I've got all that flexibility within the context of Snowflake to ultimately do those final transformations and deliver that data and activate that data with Census. So I love what Matt talked about, the flexibility side of things you've got to have, and then that speed to impact is so important.
That's great. Yeah, great addition there, Kelly. I appreciate that. All right, next, let's see here. So I've got Christian next. What best practices do you use to measure the impact of one campaign versus another? So we're back to talking about the attribution problem. Or more challenging whole initiative. We want to know what was successful and what wasn't, and then how to iterate from there. I guess, Matt, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot again for a second, talk a little bit about how you were thinking about the attribution problem to start.
Sure. So we actually use experimentation to determine the effectiveness of our individual campaigns. So one of the really good things about Braze is that Braze has like a user interface for creating A/B testing for messages or for campaigns. So essentially what we do is we run an A/B test, we hold a certain number of percentage of users out from a particular campaign, and then we look at the conversion rates downstream from that message being delivered. So it might be active users, it might be subscriptions, it might be print. And then we essentially use an experiment framework for analyzing individual experiments. And that allows us to analyze the effectiveness of those individual campaigns. And we have automated that process so marketers can access the A/B test results for their campaigns themselves without having to do that individually every single time, which is really awesome. So that's kind of the micro level of measurement that we use on a campaign to campaign basis. We also at the moment utilize a global holdout framework for analyzing the effectiveness of the whole program as a whole. So we have about 2% of users that don't get marketing messaging from us. And we track the performance of the users who do get messaging versus those that don't, to look at the effectiveness of the program as a whole and look at how it's contributing, holistically to our foundational level goals. So that's kind of the framework that we have for measurement, not really in the attribution space for messaging. In terms of where we're trying to head next, is you kind of have this, micro level where it's like, how is this individual campaign performing? And then you have, how's the whole thing performing? But there's a lot of room in the middle to run additional experimentation. So we're looking at doing things like, how are our upsell campaigns performing? And then we would hold users out from that stream of campaign. And then we would say, this is the impact that upsell campaigns are generating. And we could do that across the various different components of our program to sort of get an idea of where the impact is coming from. So as opposed to just knowing this campaign worked, this one didn't, or this one worked slightly better than this one. I should mention as well at the campaign level, it's not just simple 2 design tests that we run. We might also run different variations of copy. So we say like to optimize individual campaigns, you might have different versions of the copy, different subject lines, those sorts of things. So the answer is experimentation. That's how we measure the effectiveness of different campaigns.
Got it. Okay, so we're right here at the end of our time. There's one last maybe quick. This is optimistic of me, but I'll end with Eric's question here at the end to you, Matt. How do you go about pitching the idea of onboarding a tool like Census, or I'll extend this to the entire composable CDP that we were talking about today, and get the marketing team to fund it?
I mean, all the things that we talked about today, I guess, it's about creating a story and talking about the use cases and presenting the various options and really highlighting all the things that we talked about today. So Census allowing you to have a single source of truth, to generate quick insights, to put the activation of your data in the hands of data analysts. Tell them to watch the webinar. Maybe that's the best thing to do.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. I think that brings us to the end of our content today. Thank you, everyone, for all the great questions. Apologies for not getting to all of them. There's a lot here. I'm going to go back through the logs. Matt, thank you so much for your time joining us. Kelly and Patrick, it's a true pleasure to be up here answering questions with you as well.